All right, here we are. Our next KUTX at home session recorded this time from the KUTX CD library. And I'm joined today by Mark Duplass. Welcome, Mark Duplass.
What's up? How's it going?
Dude, I am such a huge fan of yours. I've been
Cut it
keeping up
out.
with your
Stop
career
it.
for like almost 10 years.
Really?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you and your brother Jay got the Netflix production deal, I was like shared that all over my platforms. Like
Oh man.
all of my I have talked outwardly to all of my friends about how much I am a fan of you as an actor and you and your brother as writers and directors. This is such a wonderful opportunity. I'm so excited to be talking to you today.
Well, I'm psyched to talk to you too because you're in Austin. It's one of my favorite places on the planet.
Yeah, and I'm glad we're here getting to talk about that because I have to be honest, I didn't know that you used to live in Austin. I don't think most people watching this knew that. So you were born and raised in New Orleans, and then came over. You went to school at UT.
That's right. Yep. Came there in '95 to go to college and stayed basically till about 2000, and then I lived between New York and Austin for a few years when I was doing this band, and um, and then I'm back, at least once a year, just doing stuff.
So paint the scene for us when did you start? So if you came here in '95 and Volcano, I'm still excited, was more of an early aughts band, or did y'all start getting together in the late '90s?
No, we were early aughts, and it happened kind of quickly when that band came together. Like when I moved to Austin in '95, like they were still like running Slacker and the Midnight Movies at the Dobie, and Captain Quackenbush's was like thriving, and I was like a singer songwriter back then. That was like my jam. I was like an indigo boy basically. Um, and then I had all these physical health problems with my arms and my wrists and tendonitis shit, and honestly, just from being a too intense person. And so I had to figure out how to play in a band and make music without being able to play acoustic guitar, which was my main instrument. And that's when Volcano, I'm Still Excited, started. I was living back and forth between Austin and New York. I was going to music school in Harlem at the City College of New York, and I was learning how to compose and kind of like expanding what I could do, because there's always that phase as a songwriter where you're just like, I just need 4 chords, I'm good. Then you write 10 songs and you're like, oh, I'm toast. I have nothing else. And I probably should learn the circle of fifths and figure out how this works.
Yeah.
So I was doing that. Yeah. And then my good friend Byron Westbrook was living in Austin, and he had a good home studio, which at the time was kind of rare. Everybody's got one now, but he like had it. And so I started sending him demos of these weird Volcano songs I was making, and he said, "Come down and let's make a record together." And then what we did in like early 2002 was we made this Carbon Copy EP, which is the one that Polyvinyl's re-releasing right now. It was just like a little 5-song EP that we recorded in Byron's house as we were figuring out who we were as a band.
I like that. The EP, it's an interesting tone. It transported me right back to or that early aught sound. Like some of the songs are very Bright Eyes,
Mm-hmm.
Fever and Mirrors, Bright Eyes, and then other songs I'm like, it's like listening to beat happening.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. You can see, like, if you listen to our self-titled record that we put out on Polyvinyl in 2004, we are like fully found ourselves and fully landed in that spot that I like to call goofy earnestness. We found it there. In the EP, we're finding it. So
right.
You'll feel the thing kind of like moving all around, and it's like, I love reading people's first novels. It's like one of my favorite things to do is if you find an author and you read this amazing book, it's their 5th book, I immediately go back to the first book and I watch them find themselves through that book is usually what's happening. And that's kind of what the fun of listening to the Carbon Copy thing is.
It's funny you say that because I just finished reading the newest Anne Patchett novel, The Dutch House, and it was my first one of hers reading. And then I started reading about all of her other books, and I'm like, I got to go back and read these other 8 books.
Yep.
What are some? I'm a huge book person. I'm gonna segue a little over here. So who are some of the authors who you're like referencing?
Well, like when I read Infinite Jest for the first time, and really understood like how incredible David Foster Wallace was, I was like, how is he doing this early? So I wanted to see him not be that certain earlier, just to make myself feel better about my own lack of artistic acumen.
Because you,
Um,
you can't put out a 1,000 page opus.
You can't do that. Yeah, And then I love Louise Erdrich, who wrote The Roundhouse. She writes all about Native American culture in North Dakota. She lives there. She knows it. And so now I'm actually right now in the process of reading her first book, which she was like self-published, took a while to get out. So I love that kind of stuff. It's just, I don't know, this is my thing.
Me too. Or when you read a great book and you're like, this is their first novel, and you're like, how do you go up from here? And if you can catch them like when it's just come out, and then you just get excited about getting to follow their career.
I know. And,
Even if
as
it
we
makes
all
you
know,
hurt a little bit.
yeah, even the first novels sometimes aren't really the first novels,
That's
Like I
true.
think
That's
that
true.
like we've experienced that in our film career. People look at The Puffy Chair, our first feature, and they're like, that's a really good first feature. And we're like, that's the first one you saw.
Yeah.
That's the first one we released. There's a
There's a whole shelf of stuff no one will
there's a
ever
bunch
see.
of children we are ashamed of that we keep locked in the basement that no one is allowed to see. And I have that in the Volcano I'm Still Excited vault as well. Although our deluxe edition of this EP, actually, we put out the EP, it has 5 songs, and then it's got 5 more songs that are demo versions of these things. So it's really fun when you listen to it, because I can hear one thing, I'm like, oh, that's when I thought we were gonna be like Guided by Voices. Got it. That's when I thought it was going to be more like Spoon. Got it. That's when I was listening to Magnetic Fields. Got it. And then we finally kind of ended up coalescing into something.
Right. Well, and the story of y'all getting with Polyvinyl is interesting. So Volcano, I'm Still Excited, goes on tour, and how many times did y'all tour?
Oh my God, dude. It was like such a funny process, because I used to tour as a singer-songwriter. That was my thing,
Mhm.
I'd get in a van with my acoustic guitar and go. So those were my only connections. So on the first Volcano I'm Still Excited tour, we were playing like half singer-songwriter joints that just were not welcoming our sound, as I was trying to break into the more appropriate joints like emos at all of the various and sundry cities. And then I had a good friend who's also from Austin, named Joseph Roby, who had interned with Polyvinyl, knew them, really liked them, saw them as a fit for us. And so we didn't want to like scare them and overwhelm them, but we like made it look like, oh, we're kind of like just coming through Champaign, Illinois, where they're based. Why don't you guys come out? Meanwhile, we like fully fucking targeted that show, and we're just like, we are going to go and basically use this as a showcase to try and impress Polyvinyl, which did not really go as planned, because there were like 9 people there.
Doing the same thing?
No, 9 people in the audience.
Oh my God.
Totally. So our draw was not impressive. But it turned out that like we just kind of played our hearts out, and Polyvinyl is just that kind of label where if you hear them tell the story, they'll be like, that was part of what attracted us to you, was there was no one there, and you guys played as if you were playing like to Wembley Stadium. And we were just like, the heart on that is really what we're all about. And so from there, we kind of developed like a friendship. And for those who are familiar with the indie rock deals, it's such a cool structure where we don't ask them for a lot of money, because we don't want them to go broke. We can self-record a lot of that stuff. We put in the sweat, they put in a little bit of money and help us get the record out. And together you do it as a partnership. And it's weird, because to this day, that's the same process that I've brought into the film industry that has made us, I think, the success that we are. I learned it all from indie rock. I learned it all from Polyvinyl, which is this feeling of camaraderie and partnership. And you split things down the middle, and you share it all with the people in the van with you, because that's the right thing to do. And in my business, there's the writer, the director, the producer, and then everybody else is to poop on, basically. And we don't do that. We include everybody. And it's been weird trying to explain that to people in the film business. And they're like, where did you make up this model? How did you invent this? And I was like, it's been happening in indie rock. Just call Polyvinyl. Like, this is, it's not rocket science,
It's called the human element.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So I want to bring it back to Austin. So it's the early aughts, and to like set the scene of like where y'all are playing and everything. So on one hand, and kind of like the higher brow of what's going on. You've got the Gourds who are coming out, Slade Cleaves and everything, but then you're also got Trail of Dead, Explosions in the Sky, Spoon,
Yes.
Ockerville River. And so sonically, I know what end they all fit on. So what, besides emos, where there's a live video that's come out with this reissue of that show at emos, which is it's just a lot of fun to watch.
It is ridiculous and very fun. Yeah, I mean, I think that like where we were coming from is like we would have killed to somehow get on a bill with a band like Ockerville River, who were just so awesome and amazing, and we were doing whatever we could to get in front of those bands and get noticed and just running the regular hustle like every other band was at the time. I would say the only real difference I noticed between us and other bands that were in our place at the time is that I think me and John and Byron in particular, the three of us didn't really expect that success would ever come to us in any way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. And we didn't feel we were owed it in any way, shape, or form. So whereas a lot of our friends who were sharing bills with us were kind of like, man, this sucks. We just played at Emos to 21 people. We were like, we just played at Emos to 21 people, you know? And it was almost like this, you know, Jay and I describe it as kind of like, we had a bit of an immigrant mentality to the artist world. Like growing up in the suburbs of New Orleans, we went to Catholic high schools we were supposed to be doctors and lawyers and hedge fund guys. And so we felt like we were the first people to enter this world. And our whole goal was to like get a foothold, get a little piece if we could, and then try and tee it up for the next generation. Like it was really that vibe. So we were so jazzed to be around it and be a part of that scene. I remember when we played at South by Southwest for the first year, we played every single free showcase that was offered to us. Like, come play on my porch to 7 people. We played like 19 shows at South by Southwest, and
just like it is today.
Yeah, it was so fun. I mean,
Some things never change.
I loved it, honestly. Yeah.
Those are the best like South by shows to stumble upon when you're like, I've come across a couple of shows that are just, you're walking around in a neighborhood to go to a show, and then you hear some music, and then you wander and you find something. One year I found Dale Earnhardt Jr. playing in a backyard.
I mean, this is like, look, if this was a new age radio show right now, we would basically say that is the metaphor for life. Life is what happens while you're walking towards what you think your life will be, and then you come up with something that is your life. And that is the perfect metaphor for the sideshow at South by, you know, in the early aughts. It was a great time.
That's awesome. It's really nice to hear people from other parts, because me and my friends and my whole network, and so many musicians are all in that now, and it's so nice to hear that things were the same back then, but also that like the attitude was the same. I mean, I think maybe there's a little bit more ruffled feathers around not getting paid these days, but it's nice to know that like some things never change.
And I think that, look, that it wasn't that our feathers weren't ruffled or that wasn't happening back then. I think that, you know, what I was speaking of was personal to my experience of just like so glad I had any place to play. I do think for whatever reason, like we were all very content to make money at our side jobs and not try to pressure ourselves to be a financial success as a band early on, because that's just a weird thing. Like weirdly, when I was a singer-songwriter, pressing my own CDs 1,000 at a time, selling maybe 600 of them, giving away 400 of them, and playing shows by myself, making $75 a night, I was more profitable then than I was with Volcano I'm Still Excited, where you have 3 people, the van, the motels, the overhead, charging stuff back to the label. You know, the money conundrum there is quite tricky. So we always try to just say, you know what, I'm a filmmaker. I know how to edit. I used to edit a television show for a church, like out off of 360 at night, and make my money there, and then I was good.
Well, it's nice. Like I feel like it gives you not having that financial reliance on it makes it it allows it to be more, you know, your hobby, and you can have fun, and you can put all your creative energy into that without feeling like there's not a direct consequence of what you're creating with your music and what your bank statement's going to be.
It allowed it to be somewhat in a vacuum, which is also, you know, somewhat of a privilege of like being in your early 20s and things like that with like I mean, I was living very comfortably off of about $7,200 a year, you know, and now having like 2 kids and my life as it is now, it's not as practical. So,
do you think if we weren't if COVID wasn't happening right now, would y'all have done like a reunion tour at all? Any sort of reunion tour?
I have a recurring nightmare about showing up on stage to do a Volcano I'm Still Excited reunion show, and I can't remember how to play any of the songs.
Oh no!
I think it's quite possible that that could happen if we did reunion, because it was such a weird eclipse in my life, a very short period of time where I basically had to learn how to play keyboard in order to play in this band. I'm not a good keyboard player. I had to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And so there was the 2 years where I did this all the time. It started and then it stopped. And so I think if I had to jump back in there, it would almost be like learning a second language again. So I'm terrified of playing live with this band, and I cannot fit into my Dickies anymore either. So I don't know what's going to happen if we tried that.
Which is interesting because I've been looking at those pictures, like you look the same.
Well, thank you.
You're just kind of caught in that you're like in this like ageless, but okay, like maybe the tent is different, but it's all like,
different. Yeah. Well, I'm certainly a lot healthier than I was back then. I mean, Jesus, the way we used to live and what we ate and did was just not good. Not good.
Yeah. I'm curious though, where in Austin did you live when you were here?
Yeah, like I lived all over the place. So I started off in the Jester dormitory, and then I moved at the time, 96, 97, up to Hyde Park, and it was still relatively cheap as long as you weren't like in the heart of it, you know. So on like a 3-bedroom house that was like $900 a month to share.
Oh,
with
stop
4
it!
guys. I mean, it was awful, you know, just that thing. And then I lived at the Brownstone apartment complex, which may or may not be there. It was at like 51st and Lamar, and that was a real shithole. And then what happened? Oh, we moved to South Austin at that point, which was, I don't know, still kind of like, it was still a little bit in the Keep Austin Weird, like late 90s, you know, and you could still get a relatively good deal. So we lived right by Magnolia between Congress and South First. So I had my Polvo's Magnolia Vulcan Video run, and I was like, well, I don't need anything else. I'm good.
Yeah. That's how my husband and I live on North Loop, and between like iHeartVideo and Workhorse and some other places that are there, it's like we just can walk everywhere we need to go, and we never need to leave.
Yeah, I mean, come on, you're good.
Yeah. So if it's okay, I've got a couple of questions about your film career that to me I personally am really curious about. I love Togetherness. That's one of my favorite shows, one of my favorite HBO shows. I watched it when it was coming out, both seasons, and it was actually the first show that I had like watched from the beginning, was deeply invested in. And I mean, you and your brother have this really special way of telling these compelling stories about totally normal, flawed people with normal human flaws. And you make it into incredible stories and incredible television. With nothing happens really in these stories that is incredibly absurd or hard to imagine. And even if the characters don't have some sort of great story arc or development, they're still compelling the whole time. And that's not an easy thing to do. And I admire that y'all are able to just consistently create these movies and series that do that so well.
Thank you.
And so it was the first show that I'd watched and was canceled, and I was devastated. And I'm curious how you felt about like having to wrap up that storyline, because it felt like things were getting to go so deeper, especially with Michelle and things. And then I felt like y'all did a great job of wrapping it up, but I'm curious of what that was like for y'all to have to wrap it all up, or try to.
It's a big conversation. It was a momentous time in our lives for tons of different reasons, you know. As to the trying to wrap it up thing. When you're building TV, you are always knowing that you may not get to come back. So you're always trying to make sure that if this is your last season, it can somewhat stand on its own. So we want to provide somewhat of a little bit of a landing pad, but we were assuming we were going to get a third season. They had hired us to write the scripts for the third season. The plan was for us to move forward. And then there was a changing of the guard at HBO, and things shifted. And then as happens, we were a casualty of that. To be totally fair, I don't think that we were so wronged. I can't believe we were this hit show. Like, we were a small niche show, to your point of like doing like, you know, quotidian interpersonal drama. Like, glad you loved it. And a lot of people did love it, but we were not Game of Thrones. So it's not the craziest thing in the world that we got canceled. And we were, I think our egos were hurt at first. We felt like, man, like, what, this is like so special, and aren't we good enough? You know, all that stuff. But it also came at a time in Jay's and my personal and creative life when he and I were inextricably linked, working together day after day, and starting to realize in our mid to late 30s, like, we're married, we have our wives, we have our children. We're not an 8 and 12-year-old boy who sleep in the same single bed anymore, and we need to figure out how to separate a little bit. So weirdly, the ending of Togetherness was a forced way for us to get some space, and it created some space in our life, and it ended up being quite beautiful for us in our personal and our working relationship, as difficult as it was. So it was, Togetherness is very, very meaningful and impactful in our lives in so many ways. It was in a lot of ways, it was the zenith of my partnership with Jay from a creative standpoint, and what we were meant to do together. You know, it really was the perfect form for that. But I think coming out of that, we started to realize, like, how are we going to be able to be together but separate? And that's what we've been working on a lot in the last 5 years, and Togetherness was kind of the beginning of that.
Well, wow. Well, thank you for bringing that. Like, I mean, just the fact for making that exist. And so I'm curious, since then, a lot of the stuff that y'all have done has been executive producing things. And so is that kind of the next phase of y'all getting to work together, but not like...
It's exactly what that is. And it's part and parcel with another thing that we've sort of realized is just like, you know, when you're a younger artist or whatever, when you're just beginning as an artist, you tend to be a little more self-obsessed with your own vision and getting yourself to a place of success. And we were lucky enough to get there, relatively speaking, pretty early on in life, you know, where we don't have to worry about money. We got a name for ourselves. And when that happened to me, what it made me realize is that I never had anybody who helped me get there. And it almost killed me trying to do it. And if I could help someone else get there, I have to do it. So executive producing is kind of a form of mentorship as well. And selfishly speaking, it's a new form of collaboration where, you know, I think that a lot of great artists start to repeat themselves by just doing their same thing over and over again. And I don't want to do that. I've watched some of my favorite filmmakers make great movies in their 20s and 30s, and then they just make garbage after that. And I thought, well, this would be a good way to prevent me from making garbage, is if I start collaborating with younger, more inspired, interesting filmmakers. I can teach them some stuff, give them a little bit of cash, use my name to protect them in the industry. They can light me back up with new ideas and new things. And that has proved to be a really great next step for us, which is at once a thing that I feel compelled to do with my survivor's guilt as a struggling artist, but also selfishly helping me make art that's more relevant and trying to, you know, not to get like all high horsey about it, but it's true. Like, representation has been an issue. So trying to work with more women and more filmmakers of color, you know, in front of and behind the camera has become something that we're all working on, you know, towards right now. So that's also been a part of it.
Do you find it's been like a good lesson in like humility and grace to be able to go from something that, like, with you and your brother, and it's all your own kind of self-obsessed creativity, and then kind of stepping back and like giving a platform to these younger artists, but being able to do it in a way where, like, you're able to appreciate.
Yeah.
And like, wow, it's like what James Murphy said, the new kids are coming up behind me and they're actually pretty great.
I think that's a good way to look at it. And I think it's certainly not as clean as that, because of course, every now and then my ego gets in the way and I think I have a better idea and I jump in and I start boxing people out and they're like, dude, back off, give me some room, you know? And then
Yeah.
other times I back off too far and they don't have it yet. And so the piece of art falls down and we have to pick it back up. So it's not a clean process, but it's an exciting process. And selfishly speaking, like my kids are 8 and 12 right now, and I love being around them. And this is a time in my life where if I can delegate more and create more time to be at home for homework and dinner before they leave the house in 10 years, I'm going to take that now, because it's practically working for me. And that's how I've lived my whole artistic life, has been a pragmatic approach to what is the weapon I have in my hand and how can I use this so that I don't spend my life daydreaming about how great would it be if I had $20 million? How great would it be if I had this? That's a path to frustration and creative death for me. The only thing that's made me sustainable is like, oh, I got a hand injury. I can't play acoustic guitar. I'll play this shitty Casio. I'll come up with a band called Volcano. I'm still excited. You know what? I can't make movies on 35 millimeter film. I'll make a $3 movie in my kitchen. And all of those things have always rewarded me by just pivoting to what works for me. And so I'm just that's my path. That's what I don't know. It's like I feel like it's my superpower, if I have one, is my ability to adjust and pivot and not get frustrated with what I'm either not good at or can't have, and just be honest with myself about, dude, you're a B-, and that's okay. I'm not the Coen brothers and I'm not Mozart, but I can make it work if I collaborate with the right people, and I can get it up to like a B+, and that is a life.
As you were saying that, I was thinking, well, those are really great lessons to also impart into your children. And then you were like, hey, I'm a B+. And I was like, maybe you don't, maybe that's not what you tell your
No,
kids.
I think it's exactly what you tell your kids, as in my opinion, is just like, dude, if you can achieve 85% in this life, you are killing it. I really believe that the North American standards of, unless you're thriving at 110%, you are less than, is dangerous for kids. That's what I think. But
you're making me feel really great about myself.
Yeah, it's different for every kid.
In the spirit of like being able to spend time with your kids, how has this whole quarantine time been for like your family life and dynamic?
So good, so good. When look, I have to say that we have the inherent privilege of not having to work every day to make ends meet, and the good fortune that health-wise, no one in our immediate circle has been affected by it, and we haven't lost anyone in that way. So that I'm very appreciative of that, and that allows me to be able to thrive the way we have. We watch a different 80s or 90s movie with our kids every night. We dress up different themes for dinner and get in character and play out scenarios, and we swim every day together. And I have a lot of friends who are older and their kids have already left for college or for life. And the most consistent piece of advice you get is, you'll never regret spending more time with your kids. You'll only regret having worked too hard. And so I'm trying to capitalize on what this quarantine has done to us. And more importantly, let myself off the hook when it isn't fun and I'm annoyed and I have to go lock myself in the office for a little while and be like, everybody get away from me. So
Dad's in the pod. Don't come. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really, really wonderful. That's consistently what I've been hearing from musicians and stuff who I know who have like, careers that take them away from home. So it's nice that it's like the dogs are all happy and the kids are all happy too right now.
I think so. I think there's an element to that. And again, shouldn't be pressuring yourself to feel that way 100% of the time, because you do get down. The world's in a crazy, terrible place right now in a lot of ways. But like, hey, 85%, do it 85% of the time, killing it.
Have you shown them Ferris Bueller's yet? Ferris Bueller's Day Off yet?
Yes, it's a huge, huge hit. They love Cameron. They love him. I mean, who doesn't love Cameron?
Who doesn't? And when I was in high school, my friend and I would watch it. We would just rewind the parade scene over and over and over again and just watch it.
the charm on Matthew Broderick and the intelligence at like 18 years old it's like pretty astounding.
And that clarinet scene was totally improvised.
Who knew?
Who knew?
Only had one lesson.
And so, well, I mean, man, Mark Duplass, it's been so awesome getting to hang out with you and talk to you. This has been a bucket list interview for me. I mean that sincerely.
Well, Taylor, it's been great talking to you. I'm enjoying the background with all the CDs. I feel like it's very appropriate, since we are talking about an early aughts band, to see tons of CDs behind you. Yes.
I do. To end this on a lighter note, I've got one very ridiculous "would you rather" question, if that's okay.
Let's do it. Let's hit it.
Would you rather have to have tubby time with Joseph in the old emo's men's bathroom once a week for 2 years, or would you rather be quarantined for months with Rafi?
I'd be quarantined for months with Rafi. And the thing is, I feel like I know Rafi really, really well, and I know that there's deep in there. There's a very excited human being who just wants to connect, and I would actually be excited to sift through that and see where we could go.
Oh my gosh! To transform and to get down, to cut, to get into the layers of.
I think we could do some transcending of some of El Cuñado's deeper and darker issues.
You could. Pete, maybe not so much, but you could.
Yeah, I'll share this with you as well. I've been taking online Spanish lessons while I've been in the pandemic, and my Spanish teacher, who's in Guatemala, and she's just so sweet, but doesn't know anything about pop culture here and whatnot, doesn't know what I do or anything. And she's always teaching me words, and in particular, like, niche words, and she was trying to explain to me how to say brother-in-law, and I was like, cuñado, and she was like, yeah, how do you know that word? I was like, well, it's something that's come up in my work.
Just heard it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of my friends has one. That's what he calls them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, Mark Duplass, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. This has been so awesome.
Same here, Taylor.
Have a good one.
Cheers.